What the Stoics actually believed about death. Most people spend a great deal of energy avoiding the subject of death entirely, not just their own, but the idea in general. It's uncomfortable, it's frightening, and modern life offers endless ways to stay distracted from ever really sitting with it. The Stoics took the opposite approach almost entirely. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all wrote about death directly, often, and without the discomfort most people bring to the subject, because they believed avoiding it didn't actually protect anyone from it. It just left people unprepared when it eventually arrived, whether they were ready or not. This wasn't morbid fascination. The Stoic relationship with death was built on a fairly specific piece of reasoning. Since death is completely certain and completely outside anyone's control, spending your limited time and energy fearing it is a pure waste, according to their own philosophy. Fear that changes nothing about the outcome, while actively making the life you do have harder to enjoy. If something can't be changed, no matter how much you worry about it, worrying about it serves no purpose at all, except to make the present moment worse. It's worth remembering how present death actually was in the world these three men lived in, because it changes how their writing should be read. Rome had no modern medicine. Plague swept through cities without warning. Infant mortality was devastatingly high, and a healthy adult could be dead within days of an illness that would be treated with a simple prescription today. Death, for the Stoics, wasn't a distant abstraction to philosophize about from a safe distance. It was a near constant presence in the lives of everyone around them, which is likely part of why they felt such urgency about developing an honest, workable relationship with it, rather than simply avoiding the subject the way most of us still do now. Marcus Aurelius returned to the idea of death constantly throughout meditations, often in the middle of writing about something else entirely. He'd remind himself, seemingly at random, that he could die that very day, or that everyone he knew would eventually die, or that entire civilizations he considered permanent and important would one day be forgotten completely. This might sound bleak, taken out of context, but Marcus used it for the opposite purpose. Reminding himself of how temporary everything was helped him stop taking small frustrations so seriously, and helped him actually notice and appreciate the people and moments in front of him, rather than assuming there would always be more time later. Seneca took a similarly direct approach, famously arguing that a person should treat every day as if it might be complete in itself, not in a way that encouraged recklessness, but in a way that encouraged genuinely living each day, rather than constantly deferring real living to some future point that isn't guaranteed to arrive. He pointed out that people are often more careful about how they spend money than about how they spend the actual days of their life, even though days, unlike money, can never be earned back once they're gone. Epictetus approached it from a slightly different angle, consistent with his broader philosophy about control. Your death, he argued, isn't something that happens to you specifically as some kind of personal tragedy. It's simply part of how the world works, the same as it is for every single person who has ever lived. Fighting against that fact doesn't change it. It just adds suffering on top of something that was never going to be avoidable in the first place. His advice was to accept it as a fact of existence, the same way you'd accept any other law of nature, and to focus your energy instead on the part you actually could control, how you chose to live during the time you did have. There's a specific image Epictetus used that captures this well. He compared life to a dinner party you've been invited to as a guest. A good guest, he pointed out, doesn't grab more food than their share, doesn't overstay when it's time to go, and doesn't complain to the host that the evening has to end at all. They enjoy what's offered while they're there, and leave gracefully when the time comes, because it was never their party to begin with. Fighting the fact that the evening ends, in his view, was simply confused, thinking about what kind of guest you actually are. It's a strikingly calm way to frame something most people spend their whole lives refusing to look at directly. There's a practice sometimes associated with Stoic thinking called memento mori, Latin for remember you must die. And while the exact phrase isn't found word for word in the original Stoic texts, the underlying idea runs through all of their writing. Some Stoics reportedly kept physical reminders of mortality close at hand, and wealthy Romans in general sometimes had a servant whisper a reminder of mortality to them during moments of celebration to keep pride and self-importance in check. The purpose wasn't to dampen joy, it was to keep joy honest, to make sure people weren't taking the good moments in their life for granted, simply because they assumed there would always be more of them coming. There's a related practice worth mentioning too, sometimes called negative visualization, where a person deliberately imagines losing something or someone they value, not to induce anxiety, but to strip away the sense of entitlement that quietly builds up around the good things in life. It's easy to stop noticing a healthy relationship, a steady job, or simply being alive and capable once those things start to feel permanent and guaranteed. Briefly imagining their absence, the Stoics argued, tends to restore a kind of sharp appreciation that familiarity otherwise erodes. It's an uncomfortable exercise by design. That discomfort is largely the point. It's meant to jolt loose an appreciation that comfort alone rarely produces on its own. It's worth being clear that none of this was about wishing for loss or treating tragedy as secretly good. The Stoics weren't arguing that grief shouldn't be felt, or that mourning is somehow a philosophical failure. Even Seneca, in letters written to grieving friends, acknowledged real sorrow as a natural and appropriate response to real loss. What they were arguing against was something narrower, the specific habit of assuming a good thing will simply always be there, and therefore never truly appreciating it while it is. It's a genuinely difficult mindset to hold on to in daily life, and even the Stoics themselves clearly needed to keep returning to it, given how often they wrote about the same idea across years of their own private notes and letters. But there's something quietly freeing in the argument itself, once it actually lands. If death is certain no matter what you do, then fear of it isn't protecting you from anything. It's just costing you peace of mind you could otherwise be spending on the life you're actually living right now. There's also a practical benefit worth naming plainly, separate from the philosophical argument. People who have genuinely made peace with their own mortality tend to make clearer decisions about how they actually want to spend their time, rather than drifting through years assuming there will always be more of them. Reminding yourself, honestly and without panic, that your time is finite has a way of clarifying what actually matters to you and what was only ever filling space. That's really the entire practical payoff the Stoics were reaching for. Not comfort with death for its own sake, but a sharper, more honest relationship with the life that comes before it. Subscribe for the next episode. We'll cover Epictetus's own remarkable life story, from slavery to becoming one of the most respected teachers in the ancient world.